Longtime presidential campaign advisor James Carville says it's time for the Democrats to focus on economic pain. He's got a New York Times op-ed out, and Carville says Americans are mad over affordability and always blame the party in charge, giving the Democrats a platform to build on. He's arguing for some rage on the economic issue. Of course, he's a consultant for the Democratic super PAC American Bridge. I want to welcome him to the broadcast. Good morning to you, James. Help us understand not just the argument about economic rage, but how the message would work.
Well, the message, the overall message, I would call it an argument. You have a message when you have a candidate, but the argument is that the government more overwhelmingly sides with the people who have power as opposed to the people who would like to have power. And everything that this administration does, in fact, almost everything this country does, is tilted toward wealthy people, is tilted toward older people, is tilted toward people that already have things, and it's tilted away from people that are trying to acquire things. And I think U.S. capitalism needs an intervention because it's producing wealth, but the wealth is all going in one place, and that's not to a lot of people.
So the question, therefore, becomes, we were talking about Mamdani with the Secretary of Treasury earlier this morning, and, he won on this message of affordability, which even the president seems to be trying to capture to some degree. The question, of course, is not just diagnosing the problem of affordability, if you think that that's the issue, but how do you deal with it on the other end? And there clearly are even two camps within the Democratic Party about that. There are still a lot of quote unquote capitalists with a capital C in the Democratic Party. But then there is Mamdani, who is self-described socialist. Where do you think the party needs to be on that score?
First of all, I certainly believe in capitalism. I don't capitalism. I've seen all this Mamdani socialism is like Sweden, is it like something else? I don't know. People have different terms. But what I know is we got to get on them. We have terrible disparities in wealth. We have a lot of immorality in our tax code. Somebody tell me the morality of carried interest, and I'll fall out of this chair. And there are things that we can do to make this country work for more people. Andrew, the other thing now, electricity cutoffs are up 21%. I mean, that to me, in a nation like this, it just kind of produces this kind of wealth, and we got 40% of our people just going, maybe more than that, going paycheck to paycheck.
Here's the question, though, and it goes back to really sort of how you approach the problem. Arguably one of the problems with electricity in this country is we don't have enough of it. And as a result, and by the way, there's some monopolistic practices as well, but it's a combination of the two. You need more supply. When it comes to housing, arguably, if you're a capitalist, you'd say we need more supply. If you're a socialist, you'd say we need rent stabilization. And that becomes, I think, the crux of so much of this.
Well, I believe the supply will bring, if you have a supply to start to bring prices down. But, the other thing, when you talk about costs going up, what can you do about costs going up? One of the things you can do is give people a raise. All right. I know people say, we haven't raised the minimum wage since, I don't know, God knows when. All right. And so if prices go up 3% a year, and your salary goes up 1%, it's not doing you any good. And we should put pressure. I mean, we can do something about the minimum wage. We can do something to have a tax code that profits companies from paying people. That's the problem here. Is the people don't have any money. And you say, well, electricity, it's about they didn't open this generator or something. The highest electricity costs are something like Missouri and Iowa and places like that I doubt are overregulated states. But sure, about the housing, we didn't have enough housing supply. So what do? Let's build more houses. And how do we build more houses? Well, we tax rich people, and we use that money to build more houses. That's my idea.
How do you ultimately, and maybe I'd say who within the party right now do you think represents the party? Scott Bessing, by the way, said he thought that Mamdani represents the party. I don't know if that's true either.
No one represents the party. The only person that can represent the party is a presidential nominee who will be chosen by the party members who vote in the primaries. Congressional parties don't have or generally don't, and we certainly don't have a defining person. And that's what people say, well, there's no leader of the party. No, there won't be, but that's what Democrats are going to decide. And they'll also decide in what direction that the party is going on. The greatest game in the world, well, who's the leader? Well, I don't know. Is it, no, it's not you. Well, maybe it's just, no, I don't believe that. Well, there can't be one. And so, but what can happen is we can make a good argument and we can win a ton of elections while everybody in the press is sitting on the table saying, well, Democrats have lost the Hispanic vote, they've lost the young vote, they've lost the male vote. Of course, it all came back. And you just got to win elections, but we're not going to have a leader until we have a presidential nominee.
Well, let me ask you a different question. I don't know if you could see the screen while we were talking. We threw up a headline about Senator Schumer, who is facing quite a backlash even within the Democratic Party. I'm curious where you think he lands as a continued face of all of this, or where you think Hakeem Jeffries lands relative to some of the other newcomers.
Well, I'm certainly not a person about the Senate. I don't get involved in that business. The 24 Democratic senators, as I appreciate it, can do anything they want. But I do know for a fact that Senator Schumer is quite popular and quite thought of. But the Senate has to make its decisions, and 24 Democratic senators can do whatever it wants. So, I don't have any sense. I don't know. I just don't follow that.
Let me ask you a different question about taxes, because I think taxes historically, Republicans have called for lower taxes. Democrats have called for higher taxes. Philosophically, and given the inequality and wealth disparity in the country, what do you think is an approach that actually makes sense and makes sense to those being taxed as well, even those at the highest rates?
Let's try 39.5. Which we had during the 90s, which is the most prosperous decade we've had since World War II. Why don't we try that? And there's not an iota of evidence that says that cutting taxes on wealthy people creates anything other than more wealth for wealthy people. So, and also, if you look at under Democratic presidents, economic growth, stock market growth, GDP growth, it's not even close. So this is raising taxes on high-income people to a rate of 40%. It's not only the economically wise thing to do, it's the moral thing to do.
Do you think people will leave? I mean, one of the things that we've seen, obviously, within the United States, and I thought this, look, 10 years ago, if you had asked me whether people would leave New York City or leave certain states, I didn't believe it. I don't think I appreciated, especially now, people of great wealth have access to private planes, can jump on planes. It's a whole new... the mobility of people has shifted in a way that I don't think I expected.
Well, if you got to pay all the things that people have paid for in this country and all the sacrifices they've made, if you can't live in a country with a 40% tax rate on your income above $500,000, then go, dude. We don't need you. Go somewhere else. And you sit here and drive on the highways and your workforce that's been developed by American taxpayers, the defense that you got. And, 40% is too much. Go to Switzerland.
Real quick, though, what do you think about a lot of the blue states in America? And I say that because in New York, most people at the highest rates are paying close to 55%, maybe more if they're living in New York City. Sometimes closer to 60%. What's sort of the top for you?
I don't know. I mean, I know it was 39.5 in the 90s. Okay, that was what. And by the way, Manhattan existed in the 90s. It still exists today. If all of millionaires are leaving, why do I run over them left and right when I'm walking down Park Avenue? But again, if a person's value of the country is relative only to its tax code, then that's a moral judgment that you've made. But you can't tell me that we can't have a tax rate of 40% on all income above, say, $500,000, $400,000 a year. You just can't tell me that. You can't tell me that carried interest is moral. Thank you.
Oh, well, you and I will agree violently on carried interest. I've been talking about carried interest for close to 20 years now.